Hi everybody, foXnoMad here, and today I want to help you travel smarter by talking about LUTS, which is color correcting for your videos. So this video is specifically about using LUTS and what I wish I knew as a beginner and what I now know sort of as an advanced beginner, which maybe if you're starting to color correct your videos, these are some things that can help you along. For the past 2 years or so, I've been making 2 videos a week, and it's just until the last couple of videos that I finally think I figured out at least to a place where I'm comfortable with what the video quality looks like, feeling comfortable enough to manipulate the footage to make it look better, to make it look more saturated, to play around with the colors a little bit and the exposure and to know what I'm doing in different situations. I'd say I'm an advanced beginner, but these are some things that I've learned over the past 2 years that might help you as you start out using LUTs and color tables and learning how to color correct your footage. So first of all, it all starts with your camera. So when your camera is in automatic mode, the more the camera is doing for you in the processing side, the less you can do in the editing side. So basically when you have your automatic mode and the colors are set for you and the exposure and the white balance and these things, that means the camera is doing those things on the fly, so you don't really have to edit them later. But that also means you can't really edit them later because the camera's already made the decisions for you. And a lot of the time, the camera doesn't always make the best decisions. So basically what you want to do is get comfortable with your camera settings and move over into manual mode. Now, there's a lot of great tutorials on how to do this. I'll link to some of those down in the description below. But essentially, every camera is different and you want to take a lot of time to get to learn your camera. I would start out simply, maybe go over to aperture mode, find out what aperture is, shutter speed, then go into, exposure, white balance, and so on. You want to know what those basics are so you can know what to play with on your camera. And what's also very important on your camera is the color profile. So most DSLR cameras like this one have different color profiles called like standard. You might have one landscape, you might have one cine like D, and you might have one that's natural, for example, and you can turn up the contrast and turn down the saturation and so on. So there are these different color profiles on your camera. So when you set something that's not a flat color profile, flat meaning it looks like this, which means that the camera is not making color decisions for you. That means that you have to edit your footage. If you don't want to edit your footage, well, you probably shouldn't be watching this video, but if you don't want to edit your footage, you shouldn't be shooting in a flat color profile. But if you are shooting in a flat color profile, that means the camera is taking in all of this information and it's leaving it up to you to decide how you want your reds and your greens, for example, and how the light areas of the footage and the dark areas, how you want all of that to look. So now that you've gotten comfortable with your camera, you've got it in manual, you know how it works, you've played around with the color profiles, and you've done that in different situations. So you want to shoot outside, inside, close up, far away. For the things that you're making YouTube videos for, you want to get comfortable with your camera in all these different situations. Once you've learned all of that, then you can start to begin learning about LUTs. LUTs stands for lookup tables, and essentially what they are their defined color profiles that you can add to raw footage. You can get LUTs from a whole bunch of different places. Some of your favorite YouTubers probably make LUTs. If you watch a lot of videography, a lot of photography, if you watch a lot of people who make YouTube videos about making YouTube videos, chances are that they have their own LUTs, and you can look those up. Just a quick Google and you'll probably find them. Or you can use something like Lutify Me, which is a subscription service, which isn't very expensive, but it gives you 65 or up to 200 different LUTs that you can use. So basically you load those into Final Cut or Adobe Premiere if you're using that. I use Final Cut, so I'll use that for this example. So you load those in and then you can switch and you can make your footage look like this, or you can make your footage look like this, or this, for example. So those are just some random LUTs that I'm using now here to show you as a demonstration. Now, when it comes to using LUTs, you can't just really throw them on footage. You've got to work with the raw footage first at 2 different layers. You want to use what's called adjustment layers in Final Cut. And here's how to find them. Basically what these are is they separate your edits from the actual clips. So if you've been editing directly on your clips that are in your timeline, which is how I started out, then if you make a mistake or you want to roll something back after you've made a whole bunch of different edits, it gets really difficult. And then if you cut out your clips, like now my voice, see, I had to clear my throat there. So I normally cut that out, but I'm not going to cut that out for this example to show you. If you normally cut your footage to cut things like that out, then it's going to be really difficult to copy and paste all of your settings and all those different clips and it causes your computer to work harder. So when you have to copy and paste your settings in a whole bunch of different clips, what it does is it causes a lot more things to be processed. If you just put your color edits in one adjustment profile, it makes it a lot easier both to roll back your edits, change them, or make them specific. You can have an adjustment layer for colors, an adjustment layer for exposure, for example. But it also means that your edits are existing in less clips, which is less that your computer has to remember. And it means that it's faster rendering times, it's faster processing. If you're not using the fastest laptop in particular, then it can mean that your computer is just going to work a little bit better. You're going to get a little bit more out of it by using adjustment layers. For me, it's been a total game changer to use adjustment layers. It made it really easy to play around with footage without actually committing any of those edits. So let's say I'm adjusting this video and I'm messing around with the exposure and I'm doing this, or I'm doing this, and I don't like the look. I can go back to my old look by switching the adjustment layer, and now it's so much easier. If you're not using adjustment layers, you really should. Unfortunately though, for audio, there is no adjustment layer, which I still don't get. I don't get that. That would be so great to have that in Final Cut, but that's a whole other issue. So now that you've got your settings on your camera set, you've got your adjustment layers, this is the process that I would recommend that you use to edit your videos. First of all, you want to start with the exposure, and you want to focus on skin tones if you're shooting somebody or people on video. If you're just shooting products or landscapes, then it's a little bit different. But if you're shooting skin tones and you want to focus on those skin tones and adjust your color correction around that. Color correction starts with exposure. So I saw this video by Maddie. I don't know how to pronounce his last name, but it's a great video on color correction and exposure. And he talks about Ansel Adams' color chart. So basically what it is it's a chart that tells you based on the color tone of your skin, how to expose for it. Basically the values that you want. If you're using Final Cut, you kind of want your values to be either at a 60 or a 70 or a 50 based on how you look. And you have to kind of play around with that to see what looks best for you in different lighting situations. But I found it once I got kind of the number for my skin and shooting like this, for example, indoors, I figured out that those are the exposure values that I want to use. Maddie's video is really great. I highly recommend that you check it out to work on exposure and learn how to play around with exposure settings. But once you get those done, then it's time to work into color. He also goes over that in his video talking about color wheels, which I avoided for a long time because they were very intimidating, to be honest. I was just playing around with saturation and contrast levels up and down, and it really didn't work out well. You want to avoid trying to edit with your eyes. You want to rely on what Final Cut is showing you. So you're going to use this line, for example, to adjust your skin tones, and then use these other scopes for colors to see how reds look, to see how yellows look, and all of that. It's sort of like a pilot relying on their instruments to fly rather than their eyes. It's really the same thing in a sense with Final Cut. And the reason for that is colors can look different on different screens. So you want to rely on what Final Cut or whatever editing software you're using is telling you. So now that you've gotten comfortable with your camera's manual settings, you know how to manipulate exposure, and you're not intimidated by color wheels, it's time to start working with your LUTs. Again, you drop LUTs in an adjustment layer, and you can use different adjustment layers for different things, for exposure, color, and a LUT, for example. But when you just drop in a LUT from Final Cut, for example, typically it's going to be turned up to 1, which is 100%, which is going to look maybe initially really good to you from a flat color profile, but really it's just going to be super oversaturated in most cases, over contrasty. It's going to look like this. So this particular LUT that I'm using turned up all the way would look like this. Now that might look better to you than it does to me, but I tend to go for something that looks as natural or as realistic, I guess, as possible. And I don't prefer that over contrasty look in all situations. But usually LUTs are turned up all the way by default like that. So typically you want to kind of roll that slider down and then roll that slider up so you can see the different colors and kind of get to a point that you think looks good for you. So essentially once you make the exposure changes and then the color wheel changes and you get that set on the flat profile, then what the LUT is doing is adding different variations of saturation and contrast to enhance what you've done. So it's taking that kind of raw material that you've laid out and it's adding color on top of that. Now you might want something that looks a little bit more yellow, you want something that looks a little bit more saturated, But remember, the LUT is doing a lot of the different color corrections for you. What I was doing initially was in Final Cut, you can save different presets. So if you set your LUT to, let's say, 0.5 and you want to keep it like that, then you can just make a LUT profile and save that. It's really easy to do. But what I was doing, for example, was taking a LUT, making it saved as a custom profile, and then adjusting the contrast and the saturation of the LUT separately as well. And I've realized that that's a mistake because it doesn't look, you're just manipulating the LUT. You're just manipulating on top of color manipulation, and it doesn't always look good. It looks a little bit too contrasty and it looks a little bit too oversaturated. So I don't recommend that you do that. Just remember that your LUT is essentially the color package that you're adding to your raw footage. You want to go kind of sparingly with LUTs. You don't want to do it over the top, at least for skin tones, because it can start to look kind of red or yellow. And so I would just start with those lightly and work your way up to kind of figuring out the kind of overall look that you want if you want consistency across your YouTube videos. And a couple of bonus tips that I have while editing. First of all, if you're going to be editing using LUTs and adjustment layers and color profiles, then I would recommend that you start with editing your audio first, compressing, noise removal, anything like that. You want to do that first and then add your video edits on top of that. And the reason is because I've noticed that using audio settings first and then adding color corrections later tends to be less work for Final Cut. And if you're looking for sound editing tips, I highly recommend Alex Knickerbocker's YouTube channel. He's got a great set of different tutorials on audio editing. He works in Hollywood. He's done things like, well, Mr. Robot and so on. So he's got a great pedigree and he's got great advice on audio editing. I will also link to his channel down below if you want to check it out, if you want some more tips for audio editing. So those are just some advanced beginner, maybe not even advanced beginner tips for somebody who's really just starting out, wants to get better with making YouTube videos, or at least get better with color correcting their videos. These are some things I've learned over the last 2 years, which I really wish I started doing out in the beginning, but obviously it takes time to go through the mistakes and get better. So I've done those mistakes, so you don't have to. Hopefully this will help you out. But again, I don't know everything and I might be doing things totally wrong. If you have some experience or you're doing things differently, let me know down in the comments below. I'd be interested to hear maybe what I could do better, or maybe some things that you're doing that work for you that might be good recommendations that I can try out in the future. Thanks very much for watching. Happy editing. Don't forget to hit the like and subscribe buttons down below, and I'll see you in the next video. What you do with your camera so first of all, it all starts with your camera. The more you do with your camera, well, it all starts with your camera. The more you